I'm Neil Gall. I'm a painter based in London, and my exhibition here is called Covers and Counterfeits. The title covers directly reference the studio collage, 12 which are hung in a salon style hang on one of the walls. And the word counterfeit, I think one can sort of look around the exhibition and see there are copies of things in a cheaty kind of way or a referential kind of way. The Studio magazine was the leading art magazine. When it became Studio International in 1965, it sort of became the leading sort of British art magazine for about 10-15 years, I think. But initially I was given a gift of about 120 of the magazines from my old high school art teacher. And she started collecting the magazine in 1946 when she was a schoolgirl in Edinburgh before she went to the art school. And it's a very generous gift to give me these magazines, but what does one do with these sort of smelly old art magazines? And they sat around for a while, and what I was sort of attracted to at first was not the content of the magazines, it was more the sort of colours, which were this unusual post-war set of colours, not very contemporary looking, and sort of unusual in today's eyes. And not only was I attracted to the colours, the smell, and the texture of the paper, and they were redolent of school jotters from school, and that sort of matte, sort of dry paper that you used to get in your school books, which I often felt the need to sort of scribble on or deface. And it was the similar concern or similar sort of feeling I felt towards these magazines, not in a sort of an aggressive way or a malign way. It just was saying, you know, draw on me. So I did eventually start scribbling on these things and collaging them. I mean, there's a whole genre of artists having an interface with text or even art magazines themselves. Thinking of David Batchelor and Art Forum. I think Dieter Roth has done some art magazine interfaces. A whole host of people, and it has never been an area that's really particularly interested me. It's sort of the magazines came as a gift, and it wasn't really a thought out sort of process. Many of the decisions I make in making the collage are formal and colour based in mark making. A little bit the content comes through. I mean, not all the covers, but some of them. So, for instance, there are little bits about racism, I suppose, really, that sort of existed in a British magazine in the 1940s and 50s, sort of, or certainly a sense of sort of imperial sort of, you know, superiority towards other sort of countries, and that sort of stuff, content-wise, comes out of the magazine onto some of the covers, but not in a really sort of digging way. It just sort of, it's in the magazine, so it was natural for those images to come in to form part of the content. The link to the paintings from the collage, the covers have this sort of retro colour thing I mentioned earlier, and I'd been making these flat collage type pictures for about a year, and I'd sort of also realised during the studio visit that there was a real link between the studio covers and the paintings, that these sort of slightly retro colours I was using in the paintings, well, they came from the studios, you know, they were on the wall, and that's where I was sort of making these colour decisions. My process is actually always starts in sort of like a physical way, by building a maquette or a collage, and that will and be the basis for a painting or a drawing. And although the studio collage don't directly get made into paintings, the paintings in the show certainly started off as a collage, you know, cut paper. And the drawings in the show, which are quite recent, are also from a 3D maquette, so a low relief collage of actually images from the studio magazine. So it sort of came into my drawing practice, which is a big part of what I do. I probably spend 50% of my time painting, 50% of my time drawing, and drawings which are not studies, they're finished works in themselves. I had to take it sort of as a serious part of my practice. So everything normally starts in some sort of physical form before it becomes pictorial. In some of my earlier works, which are representations of sculpture, the sculpture that are depicted are actually things I make myself. And so in this exhibition here in Belfast, there are 9 sculpture, which are bronze or cast resin casts. And they've all been sort of models for paintings in the past. And they would normally be made in a sort of quite a low-tech sort of material sort of way. So there are images of sculptures made with plasticine or electrical tape and ping pong balls, anything that was really at hand, sort of non-fine art materials. And I would use those. I have them photographed. I would keep the model in the studio and make a painting from partly the photograph and partly the actual object. And after a number of years, I sort of returned the objects. Well, actually not returned the objects. I sort of made the objects art in a way. They became casts of themselves. So we made molds of the low-tech materials and made them into high art by casting them in bronze and cast resin sometimes. So there are 2 sculptures which are, at first glance they look like lumps of plasticine, but they're cast and painted bronze. And I think that's where the word counterfeit comes in. I mean, what is real and what is not is sort of a thought that, that the viewer will have going through a number of the works. I think the reason why I quite like that idea, I think it's because it engages the body as much as the mind. When you in a very sort of simple, visceral way, when you're looking at a painting, which is a trompe-l'oeil sort of image of a paper cutout, there are these holes, and your brain is definitely saying that this is just painting trickery. But when you're standing physically in front of it, your gut is telling you no, it really is a hole. You could put your hand through it. And it's a sort of visceral, sort of bodily response that I kind of like, I think is really important for painting. It's got to have that as well as a sort of mental or, intellectual side to things. And it's the marriage of the two that makes great painting for me.